Hello, ladies and gentlemen, veterans, dedicated VA employees, and everybody watching. As always, I am so grateful for your support, for coming back to the channel, watching another video. Please subscribe if you have not. Ask questions, give comments. Let me know what topics you would like to discuss, want to hear about. Please share with friends, family, anybody who's interested or may be interested in our discussions. And let's help everybody out in a smoother process. As always, I'm Attorney Matthew Lang, VA accredited attorney, years of experience with inside the VA, moving between positions, and working in more than one office. So with all that knowledge that I have, I want to talk about what it looks like, veterans, when your claim is moving through the VA system. Now, it can't be a perfect idea because everybody's facts are a little different, and sometimes there's forks in the road and it's going to go one way or the other, and so it's not always going to be the exact same for everybody. But I want you to see the idea of what it looks like, at least, and hopefully it answers some of your questions, because we're in an era now where technology is improved so well that the VA is able to be more transparent in providing you veterans the idea of what stage or step or where your claim is in a process. But even so, I've still heard a lot of questions about, well, what does this mean, and what's really going on here, and why does it seem to move up and then down, and or suddenly just jump from one stage to 3 or 4 stages up, or whatever it may be, right? So I want to look at, again, what's going on inside the VA system with your claim. So let's take a walk. Let's take a walk with your claim. Let's say in this first example, veterans, you file a claim for the first time ever. Maybe you've been out of service for a year, 2, 3, 20, 30, and you decide to file this claim. You can file the claim, as been mentioned in some other videos, in multiple different ways. You can go online and submit it online through the VA websites. You could go in person to a VA office, meet up with a public contact, have them fill out the forms for you and file it. Now, keep in mind, though, as VA employees, they do have a duty to the government, and they're not allowed to advise you in things. It would be less like you trying to represent yourself in maybe a court hearing for a civil matter, or maybe even a criminal matter. The judge works for the court and can't actually advise you in what to do. So keeping that in mind, you also have the options of finding veteran service officers who are by law allowed to provide free services to help you fill out those claims and guide you in the process. You also have other accredited representatives, agents and attorneys like myself, who we can usually help with the new claims. Keep in mind our workload is a little different, so not all of us may be able to take it on, but there's ultimately more than one way of filing a claim. But let's say in this example, you decide that you're going to fill it out online and you're going to submit it. Well, what happens if you start the claim and it asks you a question, you're just like, oh, I can't remember that, or I don't know if I have that document. Maybe I do. Well, let's go. I'm going to go back and I'm going to look, and then you stop working the claim or inputting the claim online. So veterans, what's going to happen there is the system itself is actually going to generate a bookmark. We're going to call it a bookmark, but it's going to generate inside the VA's electronic system, creating you a file and noting that you now have an intent to file on record because you showed intent in the system to file a claim even though you haven't fully filed it yet. So if that's the case, you have an intent to file. Now when you come back to that application, or if you file it any of the other possible ways, but let's just say in this example you come back to the website and you resume that application even a week later, a month later, you're going to still hold the date for the intent to file that's now marked inside your electronic VA file as your potential effective date for your claim. You're going to submit the claim once you've completed it online, again in this scenario. It's going to then find its way through the electronic world into your VA electronic file. So VA has received it inside your file, and it prompts them now to say, hey, we got a file that we got to look at and we got to work, or claim in this case. So how do they do that though? How do they know all that? Well, you're going to find a bunch of information across the internet about the VA, but one of those things that you may run across is the idea that they use what's known as end products. So they establish your claim by using a 3-digit number which identifies the claim type. So in your case, an initial claim could be what's known as a 110 or an 010. That's to tell the VA that this is an initial claim, either with 8 or less issues or 8 or more issues accordingly, and gives them an idea of, okay, this is where we need to start in the process. Once the VA has now received your claim and that end product gets established inside the system, your claim is going to be moved throughout what's known as the National Work Queue. You could potentially land in any office in the nation now and have your claim worked. In many cases, I believe the VA still tries to keep it within the office within your state or the one that's got your jurisdiction. Some states have more than one office, but the office of jurisdiction, pretty much where you reside in what state. Again, not always the case. But the idea here is it's going to get routed through this magical world known as National Work Queue, sent down to an office and assigned out now to a Veteran Service Representative, a VSR. The VSR's responsibility now at this point is to develop your claim, veterans. They're going to look at your claim and walk through a series of evidence gathering steps according to law, at least they're supposed to. Then once they do that, then your claim will get moved to a rating Veterans Service Representative, also known as a rater or rating specialist, or RVSR. A few different names for that position. And that individual is going to make a decision at that point. But before we get that far, let's look at that process as we move through this evidence gathering. So the claim is received. Let's say, veterans, in this example, you identified some treatment at a primary care physician outside of the VA. Maybe you even identified some treatment at a VA facility at some point in time. You've stated your conditions. You've said they're all due to service. Maybe you've even put a small statement in there to how you believe they're due to your service and some of the symptoms you feel on a daily basis. Well, keeping in mind that all the information that comes with filing the claim up front is supposed to fulfill VA's duty to assist. So you may see, like, if you actually see the paper form or even the electronic kind of form online, you're going to see a bunch of pages in the front before you really get to the actual part where you fill it out. This is just all the information that you need to really know about a claim, according to law. So veterans, at some point though, even though you have that, you got to realize that you may still get another letter in general covering some of that information. It may be hard to read, unfortunately, just because of the formatting of it all, and it's not very clear, in my opinion, as to why it's being sent and what it is. And then you may freak out because it tells you got 30 days to respond, and you're like, oh my goodness, respond to what? What does it want? And it's just throwing the kitchen sink at you. So keep in mind you may get a letter like that. If you have a representative, I just would recommend talking to that representative and seeing if there really is anything that needs to be submitted and so forth. But let's say you don't get that letter because everything was already covered in the initial application, and you've provided, again, primary care physician treatment and VA treatment. That may not have been a current primary care. So the VA is going to be responsible now for a few different things. VA is going to have to go out to the VA medical center that's in charge of the records that you, veteran, have identified, and they're going to have to obtain all those records, at least the relevant records, and put them into your file, your VA disability file now. They're going to send you, veterans, a letter likely that asks for you to complete a 4142A. This is the VA's form authorizing release of your records from the doctors you have identified they're outside of the VA network, if you didn't submit that with the original claim. So they're going to ask you to do that. Once they have that, whether it was with the original claim or later on in the process, they're going to send it off for one of their contractors to go ahead through and make all the requests to the facilities, medical providers, and obtain those records and get them all sent over. And once received, they're going to land in your VA disability file. While all this is going on, the VSR is also going to have to now request your service treatment records, veterans. Anything that was documented in service, your entrance exam, if you had an exit exam, anytime you went to sick call or medical of some sort, if you're able to, all that's going to be documented in there. Any periodic physicals or checkups, it's all going to come across. And that's going to get thrown into your VA file there. Now, keeping in mind, it's not a perfect world, and VA won't know if they don't have all the records. As long as it looks like they do, they're going to have to make the assumption and move forward. So veterans, it's maybe helpful if you happen to have copies of records to probably submit those at some point too of your service treatment records. Just know it may not be necessary though, but just keeping in mind. So that's a little outside of our path here. So you have all this evidence gathering going on. Now, as this evidence is gathered, the VA is eventually going to have a duty to assist that's likely going to kick off. And that duty to assist is going to say that they need to obtain VA examinations and medical opinions associated with your claim. So they're going to go out into their systems and they're going to request these necessary exams. They're going to ask the opinions of the examiners, whether they be contract examiners, whether they be VA hospital examiners or other clinicians specialized inside the VA. They're going to get that information back as well, which is all going to get filed in your electronic VA file there, veterans. All of this is coming together, and this takes time. This could be as quick as 30 days. This could be 60 days, 90 days. We could be up to 6 months. It all just kind of depends on how the records move and if everything is deemed obtained or not. So let's say we've got everything. Let's say now the VA has done their whole evidence gathering. They've got your service treatment records. They've got your primary care physician records. They've got your VA treatment records. They've got their exams and their opinions. And because it's just a light case, there could be other evidence that's got to be gathered depending on your facts of your case. Now, there may be like PTSD, needs stressor statements, or other verifications. But just to keep this a little more simplistic, let's just say now everything that needs to be gathered has been gathered. So what happens to your claim next? Let's continue walking with it. Your claim status in this entire time inside the system is going to be listed as open as it's moving through these development phases. Once the VSR feels that everything has been done and everything is adequate enough to move to the RVSR, they're going to change the system status to a ready for decision status. And it's going to now move through the National Work Queue system over to an RVSR. RVSR is going to get your claim inside their work queue once it's assigned to them. And then that RVSR is going to open it up. And the RVSR's duty is to actually look and read through every document in your file that's been developed and obtained. It is unfortunate that I can't tell you that happens every time. But that's where your claim is supposed to be going at this point. The RVSR is going to look through those STRs again of yours, those service treatment records, all those medical records, again, from the VA, from any private providers that was received, and again, all the other evidence that may be gathered. Like I said, depends on the case, if there's other stressors or PTSD or whatnot. The whole gamut, all the exams, VA exams, all the opinions. And then what's going to happen from this point is the RVSR is going to get a few different options. The RVSR can find underneath the rules, regulations, that the VA exams or medical opinions are not quite adequate. They're not good enough for them to use because doctors may have missed or examiners may have missed something. This does tend to happen, so they have to send it back. So your veterans, your claim has stepped into ready for a decision, but that RVSR, if they can't make a decision on any of your issues on your claim, they, because of some sort of inadequacy, whether it be in the exams or be in the development process of gathering of the evidence, maybe the VSR overlooked something, missed something along the way, and this is kind of a checks and balance kind of piece to the whole system, which is nice. That RVSR is going to have to do what they call deferred. And they're going to defer your claim back down to that VSR to go, hey, we need to address these issues and fix these first. So it goes back into essentially an evidence gathering process. Your claim is walking back through memory lane at this point, we'll say. And then again, once it's all done, it comes back to the RVSR. Well, let's say not the whole file, not all the issues need to be deferred by the RVSR. Maybe the RVSR can make a decision on 2 or 4 issues, for example. Well, the RVSR is going to make those decisions, whether that be a grant or denial. So the RVSR is going to say grant a condition based upon the evidence of the record, the rules and the regulations that apply to them to do so. And when they do, they're going to issue you an evaluation, veterans, for that condition, and they're going to issue an effective date. And if you had that intent to file before your original claim, that effective date likely could go back to that date. Now, there's some other rules that could make it go earlier, maybe not, but just know that that's how they're kind of looking at that effective date. You might go, oh, well, what's this, earlier than when I filed the claim, because the rules allowed it. Now, if they have to deny something, you're just going to see it straight up denied. Now, what the RVSR is supposed to do, whether they grant or deny or defer anything, is they're supposed to give more than conclusionary statements according to the law, and an actual narrative that discusses and weighs and considers and analyzes all persuasive and non-persuasive evidence. So you're going to get a narrative part of the decision in the mail once your claim has been decided. Unfortunately, again, it's going to be a little confusing, likely, and it's going to not address everything the law says in the narrative. So veterans, if you're denied and you look at the narrative part of the rating and you can't figure out why, because of the confusion or the idea that the decision doesn't meet the legal requirements for notification, this is where I'm going to plug in my website, veteranlang.com. Reach out to me. Let me look at it. Let's have a discussion and see if I can help you any in maybe appealing those denials or even addressing those issues with the VA. So those are the couple things. Now, the RVSR can grant and deny conditions at the same time, and then at some point they can deny or grant and then defer other issues. So veterans, if you have one issue that gets deferred off, just know that your claim goes back in memory lane here and works that one issue all over again and going through that evidence process. So you can really jump up and down in all these stages in all this process in your claim. Ultimately, once your claim is done, if you agree with the decision, that's pretty much the end of the road for your claim. It's good. You get the payout, and you get your monthly compensation check every month, and you move on. If things are denied, you disagree with the denial. Maybe the RVSR was incorrect in saying everything was adequately done, and perhaps it wasn't. Or they missed something in the evidence that said the evaluation should have been higher than what they assigned. Maybe they missed the intent to file you filed and put the effective date as the date of your actual claim instead of that earlier effective date. Where it may be, if there's some sort of error in there that you feel exists, you can then move on with your appeal. And this is where your claim now moves into the next steps. So you're going to see your decision being completed in the system, but it may continue its life in essentially the appeal afterlife. And then we walk through a very similar process when it comes to like a supplemental claim. So as you recall, before I get in detail there, as you recall, the some other videos where we did a quick overview, you have options now. You have supplemental, you have a higher level review, you have a BVA, or appeal notice of disagreement to the Board of Veterans Appeals that you can work with. So if you do a supplemental claim at this point, you may be saying, hey, here's some additional evidence that did get in the record that should have been there, for example, and I just want to make sure you have this now, and then everything can be relooked at again. Maybe you want to make a claim that a duty to assist error did occur, and this is why and what the rules are. Well, you could probably do it that way too. But again, get with your representatives on that one that are helping with you. They'll determine the proper strategy for your facts of the case. I don't want to try to advise you on what I don't know here when it comes to your facts of your case here. Now you can also do the higher level review. So it's going to be fairly simple. So the supplemental claim at this point now is going to walk your claim through any development process. It's going to walk it back into the ready for decision stage. Once you submit it again, it's going to get a different end product number to identify that it is a supplemental claim. And it's just going to walk through very similar to your original claim. It's going to come to a decision, and then the decision is going to kick off, and we're going to be walking back into the same world again, where we decide if there should be an appeal and which direction to go with that appeal. What lane do we want? The supplemental, the higher level review, or the notice of disagreement to the board, or everything's hunky-dory and we're okay with the decision and we move on. Now, if you go through the higher level review, veterans, as you recall, you can't submit any evidence with that, so your claim is going to walk a little differently. If you filed the appeal on the higher level review, likely saying all the evidence is there to support the decision that the RVSR just got it wrong or missed the evidence in there, we want this overturned based upon that evidence. The decision review officer now, somebody of a higher pay than the RVSR, comes into play, and that claim of yours again is established with an end product, except the status usually flips fairly quickly to ready for a decision as no evidence can be submitted. So we're really just going to skip that evidence gathering process at this time, and we're going to straight to the decision. Decision will be made by that decision review officer, keeping in mind there's only a couple offices that handle these claims across the nation, so you're going to end up in one of those offices as we travel that national work queue route again. So it may take a little bit longer to get done just because of that, but your claim is going to move on. What's going to happen is that decision review officer is going to have, again, a few different choices. They can overturn that last decision. They can grant everything that was denied. They can change the evaluations. They can change the effective dates if they so agree with your appeal. Veterans, they could continue those denials. They could say, no, I agree with that RVSR. They did their job right. Now, it doesn't mean the decision review officer is right, so we're not at the end of the claim path yet, necessarily. Or that decision review officer can say, I do see where we failed to do a duty to assist. I'm going to call an error on that. So veterans, a lot of times you may see duty to assist errors in the as the decision. And really what's happening to your claim now is it's walking down into the supplemental claim lane, because only the supplemental claim lane at this point is allowed to develop anything or gather any evidence. So a different end product is going to get established for that tracking. Your claim is going to walk through, and the RVSR now is supposed to follow the instructions of the decision review officer and obtain whatever evidence that may be. Maybe a new VA exam, maybe a new VA medical opinion, maybe try to request medical records again that may not have been obtained because the number of requests or the amount of days was done wrong. And then the claim just walks right back to the process again. You walk right back into your decision. Now you're in an RVSR again. The decision gets made, and then we go through the whole appeal process again if need be. Well, let's just say you go to the board instead. The board has a few different options. So your claim will stay alive a lot longer. It's going to take a lot longer, unfortunately. Just again, you've only got so many lawyers and judges at this point, which is to do these claims, and this is the first time your claim is ever going to see a person with formal legal education, likely. But when it goes up there, we can do the direct docket review as an option. And if we do that, it's going to work very similar to an HLR or higher level review, as there's no evidence phase gathering. It's just going to sit and wait until it can be put in front of an attorney and a judge. And then the decision is going to be made on the actual evidence of file within the scope of the rules and the laws. And then again, if there's a duty to assist error or some sort of other error that the VA has made, your claim will now walk all the way back down to be remanded. It's going to be remanded. It's going to walk all the way back down to the VA office, and it's going to walk right through this whole evidence gathering process again, where it'll walk through a decision, and it just keeps walking. So it can go, let's just say your claim can get a little dizzy at times. It could walk itself in circles a few times. The board also has an evidence gathering option docket, so veterans, you could have the opportunity to, kind of like a supplemental claim, provide the board with that evidence instead of the RVSR, because you want the judge and attorney who have that additional education to look at this evidence and make that decision, and that's perfectly fine. Again, just get rid of the representatives on that one if you have them, and for strategy and how they'd like to work that and what they recommend. But again, we're going to walk through now the decision process, and you either get a decision from the board, or we're going to go back down and we're going to have a development and evidence gathering process again because errors were identified, or your evidence prompted a need for an additional the VA to follow through with their duty to assist. So it gets a little tricky at that point. You can even have hearings in there as well, and then there's a whole slew of things. I could definitely get in the weeds with this. Thinking of hearings, I did also overlook the idea of an informal conference with a higher level review as an option. Again, you have to get with your representatives on this one. We all have essentially different strategies on how we like to do it, different experiences, different things we run into. I know myself, sometimes I just like to put in the argument in the file and not do the hearing. Sometimes the argument's not enough when I find, for example, decision review officer has likely not read the arguments, hasn't addressed the issues. Then I may be like, well, maybe we should start moving to an area of formal conferences, and sometimes that works and sometimes it doesn't. I do find that when we hit there, I usually end up with somebody who hasn't looked at your file, veterans, and has no idea what's going on, unfortunately. So it's all strategy. That's not always the case. Those are just the worst case scenarios. It's not everybody who is the worst case scenario. There are still good VA employees and dedicated VA employees, especially ones who watch this channel, who usually know what's going on and are very, very straightforward with, okay, this is what we see, let's discuss it, and we come to a conclusion. So they're not necessarily strategies that don't work. It's just sometimes we have to determine which way we want to go and fill out the VA. So just get rid of the representatives on those. But anyhow, veterans, I went to a longer video than I wanted to because the process is really complex, and I didn't even really cover everything at this point because I want to kind of keep the videos short enough to keep a attention span really as we learn something. But overall, I want you to understand that your claim essentially is going to go through an evidence gathering process. Veterans, the VA has a duty to gather some of that evidence, but veterans, you also have a duty essentially to help your claim along as well. So, for example, if you can obtain private records from your primary care physician, it may just be a better bet that you do so and then provide those to the VA. Because if the VA never receives them, they don't have to keep going and going and going forever. They can eventually just stop trying once it's found futile, and those pieces of evidence may not make it in your file. So together we can help each other out in the process to smooth everything out is the idea there. But once you go through the evidence process, you're going to hit a decision phase, and the decision phase could fork off to different areas as well. Again, grants and denials, deferrals, remands, depending on where you are and what the terms are used in the process. And your claim could easily walk right back to the evidence gathering section again and walk through and hopefully clean up those errors and mistakes, and then it walks back up to the decision again. And we keep going in circles sometimes, and sometimes we don't. Sometimes the process is really as easy as it sounds at the beginning. As the evidence is gathered, the decision is made, everything's granted, and as I mentioned before, we're hunky-dory. Veterans, nothing to worry about there, and you move on. Living life and enjoying life as you choose, and collecting your monthly disability checks. So anyhow, that is the process in a nutshell. Hopefully it wasn't too confusing, but that's how your claim is walking through veterans, the VA system. There's definitely a lot more complexities there we could talk about maybe in a future video. In the meantime, please again, don't forget to subscribe, like, watch other videos, comment. Let me know your thoughts. Let me know what you want to talk about, what your questions are. I want to be able to again build a platform that opens up discussion and makes the process much easier for both VA employees and veterans, because if we can understand each other, I think we can make a better world together. Veterans again, veteranlang.com. If you want to schedule a time to speak with me about your appeals or your claims, if you've got a reduction being proposed by the VA, let's chat about that as well. Again, appeals for sure. If you want to just file new claims, reach out to me. I'm happy to help. We can get something started there as well. All right. Thank you, everyone. I'll see you in the next video.